Good morning, and you're very welcome to the show. And can I say a particular good morning and welcome to those of you listening in Dublin. I don't need to tell you what's on the front of all the papers today. It's a bit of a wake-up call, isn't it? I think there's been a real shift in the mood today, a slightly grim mood around today, and I think when the Taoiseach stood up in front of government buildings last night, that shift happened very quickly. And you know, I suppose one thing about it was there was a sudden sense that we were all in this together again. The Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, joins me now. Good morning, Taoiseach.
Good morning, Brendan.
How worried are you?
I am worried. I think the numbers are growing exponentially. I've been talking to Ronan Glynn on and off, and clearly we can all see the figures. This virus doesn't respect carefully laid out, calibrated plans. It will bounce up, it will return. It's deadly, it's dangerous, it kills people. And it also disables people for quite a long time. We've heard stories of people who've had COVID, who've taken a long time to recover, and then there's medical research coming out saying it can damage lungs and so on. So there's a lot to learn yet about this virus, but we know this much. It is a deadly virus, and we have to protect each other and protect our senior citizens and the most vulnerable in our society. That's the key issue really for us. And we can get it done. We did it before. And I think these severe restrictions that are coming in, we did it in Kildare and Offaly and Laois most recently, and it did actually stabilise the numbers. So I think it's important to say that to people. There is hope
this
here.
Works.
We can control this and we can make it to work. And as we move on, we're trying to keep as much as possible going, protecting our priorities, keep the schools open. It was fantastic to see the children go back into school. That's natural, it's normal. The teachers wanted to get back in there. Likewise, we have to make sure we can try and resume health services as well. There will be an impact on health services, but we do need to get diagnostics done, non-COVID areas done like cancer and heart disease and so on like that. And then keep as much as the economy going as we possibly can. Manufacturing is still going, retail is still underway. Unfortunately, the hospitality gets a terrible hit from this virus because virus really thrives in congregated settings. That's what the public health people tell us. That's how it gets passed on. And I think that is the most challenging sector, and we certainly have to do more to help and support that sector.
So why are we opening the pubs around the country on Monday?
Well, around the country, the figures are somewhat better. We felt that publicans needed a chance in terms of having conditions attached to it and so on like that. And again, that was a reflection. The situation is much different outside of Dublin. It is growing around the country, so we have to keep an eye on that. And obviously we'll take further advice in relation to whatever measures are needed outside of Dublin. But the Dublin numbers are way ahead of the rest of the country, as you can see from the figures that were outlined by NPHET, and quite dramatically different to parts of the country. And some counties have been consistently lower than other parts of the country for quite a considerable time.
The Irish Times is reporting today that some members of NPHET wanted to move Dublin to level 4. Was this considered?
This certainly wasn't communicated to us, either verbally or indeed in the letter that NPHET sent to government. And the Cabinet COVID Committee met first, and Ronan Glynn is on that. Paul Reid is on that. They both attend that meeting, to provide research and information to cabinet ministers and a whole series of officials. That was not discussed at all. No mention of it.
And as the Taoiseach, presumably if they were thinking about that, they would have told you in some way, would they?
We would have been alerted, and we have this new oversight group to bring the departments together, headed up by the Secretary General of my department, and he certainly would have been told, or he would have said it to me.
So like, even if it didn't form part of the advice in the end, they would have said to you in some way, by the way, some people were arguing for 4.
But no, not so much that. I'm not saying that there could have been people within the NPHET. I wouldn't be privy to the internal discussions within NPHET itself.
You wouldn't, no?
Well, I think, people in NPHET must be free to articulate within NPHET, but I would get a signal that something is coming down the tracks here, or that they are considering something as dramatic as level 4. Because it also suggests
that level 4 could happen in Dublin in the next couple of weeks. That's not something that you've heard anything about either.
No, our objective is to get back to level 2 in Dublin. And we must really focus on adhering to the guidance that has been issued yesterday and to the rules. That's the best way to avoid level 4 and get to level 2. And that's where we want to be. Because there is this is an attempt to balance, manage, and live with COVID-19. As the CMO said yesterday, the objective here is to stabilise the numbers. Why? Because there is a huge economic issue here as well that we can't ignore. I mean, we'll have a deficit of 8%, about 24 billion maybe at the end of the year, necessary. I think we're looking at something similar right throughout 2021 now, because I think that this virus will be with us for that period. Hopefully we get a vaccine.
For the whole year?
Well, I think we could get a vaccine. We may by the middle of the year. But if you take all of what will be involved in manufacturing that vaccine globally, the full impact of the virus will be with us for the full year, I think. That's my view. And that's a sobering thought.
It is.
But that said, the positive side of it is there's enormous research going into the vaccine. Our potential candidates, there's 160 potential candidates out there, different companies around the world. Even in Dún Laoghaire, I was out recently to a company, ACC Innovates, extraordinary company that is developing its own technology where it can manufacture a number of vaccines at the one time, and they're in partnership with an Australian company. The country is part of a European Union a consortium involved with the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, so that we pre-purchase. Mike Ryan of the WHO is of a view that there will be a vaccine around April, but again it'll take considerable ramping up then to get it manufactured and get it out there. So
okay.
we
the Taoiseach is of the view that vulnerable people, I think, and possibly frontline workers could be vaccinated in the first half of next year. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, that's what we're hearing from WHO. But of course, that's not definite. I mean, as I said, I was given a date around March, April could be potentially a moment when that would crystallise. But again, there will be a whole issue around the manufacturing. That's why I mentioned that Dublin company, which is an Irish-owned company. It's fantastic to see it. World-beating technology. That's the kind of thing we need to get this vaccine rolled out when it arrives, and that combined with therapeutics are helping doctors and hospitals.
That's improving all the time.
That's improving all the time as well, you know. And I was down with Regeneron in Limerick recently, 1,500 people working there. They told me, for example, they have 2 candidate drugs that will help to treat people and prevent. So say in a household someone gets COVID, you'll get treated with this drug, but your family will be treated also as a preventative. So there's a lot going on there, and I think that's why I'd say to people, you know, stick with this, because we will get through it. You know, science and research will get on top of this virus, just as in the past we've got on top of other viruses. But we just need to manage ourselves, protect the elderly, protect the most vulnerable.
Okay. Can I just ask you one other question about what was reported in the Irish Times today as well, which was that there was a discussion by NPHET that the rest of the country might need to move on to level 3 now. Is that something that you were made aware of, that conversation?
Well, NPHET did articulate to us that they're very concerned also about the growing numbers across the country, but they didn't recommend moving to level 3.
Instead, we're opening the pubs, all the pubs. No, but given what Professor Nolan told us yesterday, which I think for a lot of people was the first time it was explained what community transmission means. And clearly, it's not that people just magic it up out of nowhere in their house. They're getting it in pubs, they're getting it in restaurants. This is what we're being told. Yeah. So if the choice is on one hand that the rest of the country is teetering on needing to go into level 3, it seems like we're going in the other direction by deciding to open all the pubs.
Well, again, quite a lot of pubs are open and were open through the gastro issue, and then you had all this sort of pizza stuff and all of that, which was beginning to bring all of that into disrepute. I would argue there's a credibility issues around that.
Were there, yeah?
To be honest, I would think there is. And then if you have the pub open in a rural part of the country where the incidence is very low, who would abide by the social distancing, you're saying, is it fair to that person?
So was that a mistake all along,
no, I think,
do you think?
No, you see, as we live through the virus, you're going to learn, and habits and patterns will develop. The key is to adapt and change. And by the way, you know, we're going to have to watch the numbers over the next while, Brendan. Your point is valid. I take your point. Nothing is set in stone, and we're going to have to watch the numbers and keep control of them. You know?
Okay. Now, you mentioned the economy. The hospitality industry in general and in Dublin today is reeling. Elena Fitzgerald-Kane from the Irish Hotels Federation, right? So she's saying there are 270,000 jobs in hospitality. She said 100,000 of them are gone already, and another 100,000 of them are at risk now. There are reports that 50,000 jobs will be lost in Dublin this weekend, and I suppose Those jobs, a lot of them are young people. They're not the best paid people in our economy. They are paying an awful price here for all of us, aren't they? What do you say to them?
They are, and I think the virus has impacted on lower income workers than higher income workers. That's clear from the tax returns and so on. And we have to do more, and we have to recalibrate, and the budget gives us an opportunity to look again at issues like the pandemic unemployment payment. We did change that already now to make it available to new entrants. That was going to be shut off in terms of new entrants. We've changed that, and it's open now to people who were laid off to go onto the pandemic unemployment payment.
But a lot of people at a lower level.
At a lower level, yeah. But again, we'll have to, I think these are issues
we're going to have to look at that again.
We're going to have to revisit some of this in the light of what I said to you about looking at a more 9 to 12 month time frame. That's very challenging for Paschal Donohoe and Michael McGrath. Both of them are wrestling with this in terms of the enormity of the budgetary thing. But on the positive side, Europe is clear it wants to, through the European Central Bank, it wants to continue to support member states through this crisis. So I think.
So could we see the pandemic unemployment or the wage subsidy and unemployment payments go back up?
Well, I think there's three aspects. We will constantly keep that under review and monitor the impact of the changes. We decided to keep it. The first step we decided to do was keep it going to next April, and then moderate the rates. And then we've now adapted and changed already on PUP and said, okay, it's open to new entrants. I think we do have to look at that in the context of the hospitality sector. But equally, I think we have to look at sector-specific measures. So the arts as well and culture has to be looked at. I think we need to be more imaginative around the social protection area in terms of what I might call the gig economy, or you take sound engineers who ordinarily would be self-employed, who would have plenty of stuff on, but now might have 2 or 3 gigs in 10 days or whatever.
If that.
They're afraid to come off PUP to go on this because they won't have a sustainable income. We've got to marry the two or create some flexibility there where people in that sector can work but also have a floor income. And I think those are the kind of areas where we have to look at and be more sector specific. So, for example, take schools and education. I would like us to do more for the arts through the schools. Already there are very good schemes of artists and residents in schools, writers and so on like that. I've said to the Minister, Norma Foley, look at increasing that scheme, giving artists work in schools. The children will benefit, the arts and culture benefits, and we keep artists working and keep an income stream going. So I'm interested in looking at kind of alternative employment streams as well.
Okay.
And I mean, Eamon Ryan on the retrofitting and stuff and areas like that. We have to create new areas of employment as well. COVID is going to change our economic structure. It's going to accelerate some changes, and I think we have to be clever enough to try and see where can we move to where we'd like to be post-COVID in the kind of society we have and how we live. And I think that's something we need to put a bit of thought into.
Colin McCarthy makes a point in general that for the new economy to emerge, we have to let the old one die. That we can't keep it there, zombie firms and everything. Are we coming to that point where you're going to have to start saying we can't keep some things going?
We're not there yet, but he has a point. He has a point because we are borrowing a lot of resources, and I believe we should allocate some of those resources to productive areas that can create new employment in new areas and create a new economy. That is in digital, it is in the green economy. And I do think in the agri-food area as well, I think there are new income streams and new types of activity we can develop through the utilisation of resources that we're currently borrowing so that you get a longer term return on that allocation of resources.
Taoiseach, just to go back to the hospitality industry for a minute, there's a texter here, a restaurateur. Why couldn't they just give us even the weekend to move all the produce we'd bought in? They allowed weddings to go ahead. They could have given us the weekend, more dumping of good food again now. And I think a lot of restaurateurs making the point that they found out on Thursday night through, I think, Micheál Lehane on RTE News, that this indoor dining restriction was happening. I see Niall Zabongi, a great young entrepreneur of Sustainable Seafood Ireland, tweeting there overnight that he has 30,000 of stock ready for the weekend. Now we're told all restaurants are to close. WTF are we to do? Was there any better way of doing this? Did it have to be landed on the hospitality sector so suddenly like that?
This is something government wrestles with all the time, to be honest, and that is a fair criticism. And last evening when our officials and were speaking to stakeholders, that came across strongly. We did the same in Kildare, Laois and Offaly. it is growing fairly significantly in Dublin on a daily rate. And NEFIT, in its advice to us, said, we want you to act urgently.
Okay.
Urgently was the word
Was
in the
the
letter.
advice from NEFIT taken lock, stock and barrel,
Yes.
100%?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, on this
Because
occasion.
I suppose the Living with COVID plan, which we'll talk about in a second, but like they seem like innocent times now last Tuesday. The Living with COVID plan and the introduction of the new oversight committee, people might have got the impression that the idea now was that, yes, health is one thing we base our decision making on, but that we need to think about economic impact and all these other things. And they might have thought, okay, the advice started with NEFIT, and people were still holding out a hope, I think, that the advice might be diluted. It went through the oversight committee, the cabinet subcommittee, and then the cabinet, which I suppose would take the advice of the subcommittee, but not questioned at any point, or no sense that you weren't going to accept it. No.
The numbers are fairly damning. But your point is valid, and people looked at the oversight committee, and some people thought we'd be trying to delay deliberately NEFIT or trying to change. Sometimes NEFIT's advice has been moderated. Why was the need for that oversight group? Well, first of all, to have better coordination across government departments. Secondly, to have the CEO of the HSE and the CMO in the one room with officials, so that there's a better alignment between recommendations and reality in terms of implementation. So, for example, if you remember a week before the schools, we got advice from NEFIT, and the education department was hit for six because NEFIT said, you now must, a week to go, adjust to public transport rules and have 50% on the buses. Now that was a game changer for education, because education had been working with public health people all along. Very good safe protocols in terms of children having their names to a seat, siblings sitting next to you, class and all of that. And suddenly, out of the blue, there came a proposal. Now, NEFIT didn't feel this would disrupt the school. They were doing it from public health point of views, but education suddenly had to, within a week. No, we couldn't adopt that within the week, and we didn't. We said we will work towards it over the coming weeks. It meant 1,600 new bus routes at a cost of about 80 million. That's the type of thing that you need an intergovernment department to work through. Okay. The other one was, if you recall, there was advice around Gardaí maybe inspecting or going into houses. Now, that it isn't really possible in our view. There's a whole range of other issues around civil liberties. So you do need, at times, this oversight group to look through how will we implement this effectively on the ground. NEFIT is there to make sure that public health is central to everything we do. There is, on some occasions, will be a necessity to work through the practicalities of that. On other occasions, like this week, the numbers on a daily basis are growing, and the modelling done by Philip Nolan is clear that if we don't do anything, we're looking at 1,000 a day in a month. And he was only looking out 4 to 5 weeks.
So on Tuesday, the Living with COVID plan and everything, it didn't really survive first contact with the enemy at all, did it?
But it did in some respects, because NEFIT have come in and said, look, go to level 3 on Dublin.
Level 3 with extra things.
But NEFIT disagree with that. Like NEFIT are saying we interpret the additional restrictions as up and to, including the ultimate closing of indoor dining, which, take your point, but it does remind us all, this virus does not respect, choreography or plans, or we've got to be ever alert.
So basically, a living with COVID plan only works if the COVID behaves itself, is kind of it.
Well, the plan is set in stone for 6 to 9 months. We know what level 3 is.
Okay.
We know what level 4 is. We know what level 5 is. Yeah, and we know what on the other side what level 2 is and what level 1 is, and we can get to those too. If we can work collectively to nip this in the bud. And adhere to the guidance, just avoid do social distancing, avoid social contacts, to keep them to a minimum, and do the normal basics of washing your hands. Etiquette, that's so important.
See, I wonder sometimes, did we need to go up a level, or did we just need to enforce more what was there? Tell people what to do. And George Lee made a point last night, and I think he got it from NEFIT or something, which was half your social contacts. Should we not have just told people, look, cut down your social contacts? Should we not have been formally told to go into bubbles at an earlier stage than this?
We were really. I mean, we've been told that from the beginning.
Were we told
but I think what happens
create
is,
bubbles?
I think, I remember Tony Holan at the very beginning when I was leader of Fianna Fáil opposition, and we all came in as party leaders at the very beginning of this, and some people were saying we should close schools early and all of this. And Tony Holan, being a practiced professional, along with Ronan Glynn, public health people who know the textbook stuff of this, who also know the reality of it, we're saying, hold on a second, the public mood will only sustain the lockdown for so long. You know, the psychology of a pandemic is as important as the physical presence of the virus. And so the idea that you know, people's moods will swing on this, people's attention to this will swing. There'll be different sectors of society, different age cohorts looking at this differently. The summer opened up. We needed to open up in the summer.
Okay.
You know, people needed to get out. People needed to, you know, unwind a bit. It's closing back in again. I think the challenge is, can we kind of get that focus back? Because the winter will be challenging, to make sure we keep our schools open, keep our students accessing higher education in a reasonable, safe way as well, keep our health service going, and keep as much as the economy going as we possibly can, and have a reasonable quality of life. And that's, I think, is the way forward.
If I could quote your colleague Jim O'Callaghan, he said to Claire Byrne the other day, "We'll drive ourselves mad if we keep doing this for another 5 or 6 months. We introduce restrictions, numbers will drop. Then in 3 weeks we lift the restrictions. Numbers rise again in 6 weeks or so." And like we were always told from the beginning by Mike Ryan and people like that lockdowns are a failure. Lockdowns are a desperate measure. A texter there saying, could this upping levels be described as a failure of government to handle this right so far? A leading epidemiologist recently stated, if we entered another lockdown, the government should hang their heads in shame. There's been a lot of focus on what people need to be doing and what they didn't do. And then we're told, though, that most people are doing what they're supposed to do, but yet we've ended up here. Is there any fault on the government side that we've ended up with this failure?
Well, first of all, level 3 is not a lockdown, Brendan.
Okay.
I mean, this is very important. Like, level 3 is nowhere near the lockdown we had. There's no 5 kilometres, there's no 20 kilometres, you know. People can work in most areas, in retail, in manufacturing, in construction, in education. There is one sector that is taking a terrible hit, and that is the hospitality and related tourism and travel and aviation. So that whole area is the one most impacted, not just here, but across the world. No government is going to stop the virus on its own. The virus does, you know, it's a collective effort on all behalf, and the virus is a very dangerous virus. It continues to spread.
The issue is not enough.
No, I don't actually think we have to keep at it. I mean, I take Jim's point, because Jim is articulating what most people are saying in terms of Mary, my wife, says to me when I started talking about this, does that what's going to happen at Christmas? You know, what does this mean? Does this mean we've only 3 households or 2 households? People worry, you know, people that frustrates people.
And
people are anxious about this.
Are we going to be in and out of various levels of restriction and potentially lockdown?
You see, the alternative is this elimination strategy that has been proposed, but I don't think as an island nation that's very connected to Europe, connected to Britain, obviously north-south, I don't think we can do the same elimination strategy as New Zealand. I don't believe that is possible. I don't think economically we can pull it off either. So as Ronan Glynn said to us yesterday, you know, we've got to keep the numbers stable. We've got to be vigilant and focused on it, and we've got to manage it, yes, over a period of time. It's not because of this virus. It's a 1 in 100-year event. It's affecting how we do things. It's upending all our lives, how we behave. You know, we don't shake hands anymore. You know, you get into a car with a mask and you say, God, you know, who would have thought a year ago we would be doing this?
Do you have those moments like where, like I know I have them, I think a lot of people do, where you suddenly go, what the hell? You suddenly see it all with clarity. The stuff you've been taking for granted for months.
Absolutely.
And you say, like when you stood in front of government buildings last night, doing that cannot be how you imagined it would be being Taoiseach. That can't be something you imagined you'd ever be doing.
No, it's a surreal experience in some respects. It's much different to what one would have thought being a Taoiseach ordinarily would have been. I mean, I went out to Clonakilty last Friday, I think Friday week, yesterday week, and open to announce 150 jobs in Global Shares, 300 jobs. Brilliant company. They manage employee share options and all of that in Clonakilty, fintech company. Normally, if you're down there, there'd be 300, 500 people at the event. You'd be announcing the 150 jobs. There was about 10 to 15 people. You're talking to an empty audience, and then you're walking through Clon, and there's all masks. People are wearing masks. So the only glimmer of hope, like of normality, 3 young students come along, you know, Sir, do you mind? We're 5 minutes late for school. Would you ever do a quick video for us there to explain to the principal why we're late for school? You know, and I do the video, and you said this is a bit of normality again. You know, a bit of crack.
Yeah.
And I think they're the moments we have to grab onto. You know, but it was a very strange experience. You know, because you can't. Even opening Christy Sullivan's office, he was the TD. There was no crowd there. There was a few people across the street waved at you, and you kind of said hello to a few people, and that was it. So it is a very different experience for all of us. And even going into government buildings, you know, a lot of people are remote working, but then you also, you know, we have to watch our space in meeting rooms and so on like that. We have to, you know, it's a much different experience where you eat, how you eat, all of that. That's what I find. And I think, but we just have to try and keep adjusting, keep resilient.
I noticed that the opposition have now, they very much rode in behind the plan last night and behind you in a sense. Tuesday, the launch of the plan was a very different story. You said the opposition at that point were trying to undermine the public health message. Do you think that Mary Lou McDonald, Alan Kelly, do you think they were being irresponsible on
Well, I think
Tuesday?
there were. I think to be fair, I felt. Look, I don't want to get. I appreciate the fact that they welcomed yesterday's and went behind it. I genuinely appreciate that. I think that is important. I think, for the previous week, I think there was a bit of politics being played. I think Alan Kelly and Labour have been straight and fair, and he contacts me. I think, you know, I thought Mary Lou and Sinn Féin were taking a particular stance that I think was undermining, particularly the testing and tracing, because huge efforts have been made there. And for example, the plan does have specific.
But it's not where it should be, is it?
No, but it's in a better place than most. I mean, Scotland were on to Ireland last week. We helped them out with lab capacity. You know, I mean, it's in deep trouble in the United Kingdom. There's huge pressure globally on the testing kits, and there's two or three companies kind of control that market. So so we're up to 15,000 capacity a day now.
So we can't go beyond that.
Well,
no?
I would like to think we could in time, yes. But like, to be fair, we've done a lot of serial testing in nursing homes and in meat plants, and so far the positivity rate is very low, and that proves the point about community transmission. What happens, of course, someone brings it into a meat plant and then it spreads like wildfire because of conditions that pertain to a meat plant. I think we have to keep the serial testing in nursing homes, because that was the area the last time where, you know, a lot of people got infected and unfortunately a lot of people died. So we have to do everything we possibly can to try and keep it out of nursing homes.
Okay, going back to Tuesday and that criticism, do you think any of it was fair? Was it a bit confusing?
I think the difficulty with the plan was the virus came along with Dublin, and if it came along with advice.
So it's back to what
You know,
I'm saying. The
and you're
living
saying-
with COVID is not COVID proof, obviously.
It's not COVID proof, no way. And so I take that point, you know, but I was prepared to endure that and take that on board to get the plan in place in terms of what I mean by the criticism and so on, because I think the plan needed to be done and needed to be published.
Okay.
Because it's a 6 to 9 month plan and it won't vary to any great degree.
Okay.
And in fact, the opposition will say to you, yeah, we can go with the plan.
That's not what they were saying on Tuesday.
No, but they were more or less focusing in on Dublin on Tuesday. They were giving out the testing. They were pretending there was nothing in the plan about testing, whereas actually they were very specific.
And they were saying the plan was confusing, I guess, because Dublin was.
But
you had set up 5 things, and then they were saying Dublin wasn't on any of
But
the
it became
5
the fad
levels.
as well. The word confusion is a great word to use every now and again. If you're on the opposition side, you know, you'll throw it back. But I don't think it was fair, and I think it did undermine a bit the public health message. Because
So they were being irresponsible, you think?
I think they were being political about it, and I don't think we can be political about COVID-19. I think it transcends politics. When I was in opposition, I know it was in the interim period. I have experienced this when I was Minister of Health in SARS. You can't mess around with a pandemic. And the big tension, if I'm honest, apart from politics, is that tension that you discussed earlier between economics and public health. And
But
a lot of people
that tension isn't there at the moment, is it? Because you took the NEFID
we did, but some
recommendations
some people in the economic area, in the enterprise area,
Okay.
would say, surely you can do this, and look, we could do that, and we'll get away with that. The ultimate point is, if we don't keep the virus down, the economy will suffer really badly. So there is an inextricable link to keeping the virus down and keeping economic activity going. But that tension will always be there. But people saying we can open up more. Which I fully understand, because if you own a restaurant or you own a pub or you own a hotel, you want to make a profit. You want to make your living, you want to keep your people working and keep going. I understand that. But if the virus takes hold, there'll be a lot more than just hospitality closing down, and we don't want to go back there.
Have you been an unlucky general? A colleague of yours is saying today in the Irish Times he's a bit like Lemony Snicket, hit by a series of unfortunate events.
Not at all. I don't feel that. I feel very...
You don't feel like you've had...
No, sorry, we've had... Look, but I don't feel... What I feel most of all is the fact that I'm in the middle of a global pandemic as Taoiseach. I have responsibilities, I have obligations. That's the great motivation to see, can we, along with my colleagues in government, get the country through this period. Yeah, we've had a very difficult start. Certainly, I get that. But life teaches you. Life is not going to be smooth. So mentally and psychologically, I'm kind of resilient enough, I would like to think.
You're not rattled?
I get rattled now and again, but I can kind of come back from it and deal with issues, But I think the overarching, or the big dominant feature of politics right now and government is COVID. It's impacting all aspects of life. It's impacting people's reactions to events as they unfold.
Is it tricky for you having the former Taoiseach, who is also the Taoiseach in waiting, as your Taoiseach, and of course he's also from your sworn political enemy, Fine Gael. I think initially, pandemic or not, is that tricky situation anyway?
I think initially that was challenging, and I think my job, as Taoiseach, and whoever is Taoiseach in a coalition government must work to keep the members of that coalition together.
So does it annoy you then when the Taoiseach is out preempting announcements, when he's out going on solo runs on Twitter or whatever? That
happened once. I don't take as much... I don't worry as much about that, if I'm honest. And to be fair, I don't think he's been doing it as often as has been commented.
Hang on a sec now. You talk about the opposition undermining the message during the week. On Thursday, the Taoiseach came out in the Dáil and said he could see wet pubs in Dublin opening in a couple of weeks. Is that not like completely confusing the message?
Yeah, I think in terms of he was in Dublin. Yeah, that wouldn't have been entirely accurate at the time. But I didn't see the context now in which he said that or the full statement of that.
He said that wet pubs are opening around the country on Monday, and he hoped it would be shown that they could do it safely and responsibly, and that then in 2 weeks' time we could see wet pubs opening in Dublin. That was on Thursday.
Right, but he was saying in the context of it working elsewhere. But obviously, clearly, the situation as now has changed fairly significantly.
He announced the extension of the lockdown of Kildare on Twitter minutes before you publicly announced it, didn't he?
No, I think not on Twitter. I'm not sure whether he did it on Twitter or not. To me, can I just come back? I mean, there's a lot of noise.
What about the whole the green list issue? Where he said, look, it's wrong to have. He came out, said it's wrong to have mixed messages. If the advice isn't changed, don't have a green list. He was seen as being like going out.
As I said early on, there was various sort of challenges and so on like that. But on the whole, though, our relationship was very good.
Okay.
And we get on very well on a personal level.
Do you?
Yeah. And with Eamon Ryan, the three of us, we have a great facility to pick up the phone if we think there's something bothering us or we think there's something wrong. We have a cabinet coordinating committee which is made up of the three of us and officials to hammer out any issues where there's a disagreement. Leo interrogates issues, to be fair to him, and will give different perspectives on issues. And he'll weigh it up himself in his own mind at times, and he'll speak this out, which I think is a healthy thing. Yeah. I suppose in politics there's a lot of noise going on around the bubble. So a lot of people focus on that kind of stuff. He said this and he said that, and he said it before you said it. I tend not to focus as much on that. It doesn't bother me as much. Maybe it should. It bothers some of my colleagues maybe. I tend to focus on the substance and the policy, and I want to get things done. If somebody else mentions it before I mention it, that's not really the issue. If it gets done, so we had to do Kildare, we had to do Laois and Offaly. It wasn't popular, and people say around messaging, people didn't like the messaging on that occasion. Fair enough, I understand that because people didn't want to go back. They felt they were going backwards, but it did work. The important thing was to do it and make the decision to do it. Getting schools back was a clear priority, and we just went ahead and did it. So the doing of it is more important than getting it achieved. For me as Taoiseach, is what is important.
Would it have been better if he stayed on as Taoiseach for the time being, for continuity for people and just for a sense of settledness? He had been there in situ, and maybe Simon Harris as well. They had been there. People seemed to trust them, and the polls will show people were very supportive of their measures. Why was it important for you to come in the first half of the rotation, if you will?
Well, any political coalition has to have sustainability, and there are political considerations in terms of what happened at the election and all of that, and the strength of parties and so on. And certainly from the Fianna Fáil perspective, having been the largest party in the Dáil and so on, I think there was an expectation. And to be fair, myself and Leo had discussed this very early on, and there was a sense, that Fianna Fáil would take the Taoiseach's position. But the more important point we made when we met was there would be an equal partnership, that it wasn't one over the other. I mean, Leo is
so it is two Taoiseach as
no, Leo, no,
say.
no. In terms of the parity of esteem, of respect, of how we operate, it's not one trying to lord it over the other. It can't be. That will not work. And likewise, the Green Party is a very important part of that tripartite coalition, which is a first major tripartite coalition in a long, long time. And I think Simon Harris is at the table. So actually, you have a lot of experience, you have a lot of continuity, as well as fresh blood and new perspectives in terms of how society should change into the future, from health, from housing, two portfolios we have, to the whole green revolution, which has to happen. I mean, that is the other canary, in the coal mine. It's been there a long time, and I think that's what makes this government and the composition of this government, I think, interesting.
Of course, it has meant that you are getting the very, very challenging half of the period, and that Leo Varadkar will get what we hope at that stage will be a recovery.
I hope he does, and I hope that's what happens. Yeah. I do, of course, because that's mission accomplished. In a way, like this has to be above politics in a way. I know some of my own people may not like me saying that, but when you're in the middle of a global pandemic, the last one was 1918. To a certain extent, we have to put party politics to one side and get on with the job. I think actually, by the way, then parties will benefit from that. I think my experience of meeting people on the ground, they like politicians to get on with the job. They don't like the bickering. They don't like the over-partisan engagement. We all do it. I accept that. But the public actually don't warm to that, and they don't like it.
Why do you think that the opinion polls but opinion polls would show there was huge support for the government's efforts to fight COVID, the previous government. And then we saw again in the Sunday Business Post, and I think in the Sunday Independent had a similar finding last week, that public support, I know it's a more complicated time, and I know I take all that, but public support for your government's effort to fight COVID seem to have gone way down.
I think, as I said earlier, the mood has changed, and we should try and recap. In other words, early on, we were all I suppose people didn't see the longevity of this in the early phase. We'll get over this in a month or two. We have a lockdown. Summer's coming. We'll open up, things will be grand. And there was that sense of expectation. That was dampened late summer, middle of August. Signs were beginning to come that numbers were growing. This virus isn't going away. That is, I think, upsetting people. Equally, though, when we look at the AMORIC research that the Department of Health does, to be fair to a lot of people, adherence went up. Interestingly, adherence to guidelines went up nationally over the last 6 weeks. Mask wearing is interesting. The new government got to grips with the mask wearing fairly quickly, and I got the regulations signed around public transport and said, look, let's get on with it. People are arguing about who will implement it. The people will implement it if we just signed the regulations. And 90% of people are adhering to mask wearing in public transport and in shops. In some respects, we do need the people with us in terms of going with COVID. But some of the decisions we will take will not be popular, and we have to be prepared to do that.
Knowing what you know now, would you do anything differently, like in the 7 months since the election, since becoming Taoiseach? Is there any big thing that you would do differently?
Before the election? Or
since? Let's take both. Sorry, since the election or since you became Taoiseach?
Yeah, well, since the election, I think the pandemic came in. I think we played an honourable enough role in terms of just rowing in behind the interim government and saying, let's do what we have to do.
Anything you do different, though?
I was extremely constructive. I would have worked privately with the then Taoiseach Leo and Simon Harris, just giving my thoughts. I'd have spoken to Tony Holohan and others, because I felt that is what was required. I think that period went on too long. But that wasn't all within my gift. I think some decisions needed to be taken. If you look at July, when we came in, we went at breakneck pace in July. People may not realise that.
So what went on too long? What decisions should
forming
have
the
been
government
taken?
went on too long.
Yeah.
It took too long from February, I would argue, because and it was difficult and challenging. But when we got
Why did it?
I think the whole policy formulation piece, the negotiated program for government, COVID itself, by the way, in terms of social distancing and times around meetings, how long you could meet for and all of that. And then the interim government had to deal with COVID. But in retrospect, if you look at July, then we did go at breakneck pace. 11 bills had to be passed. The July stimulus program, which was a 7 billion, which we take in the credit guarantee, 7 billion intervention into the economy. And that created its own challenges and tensions. You remember the last day in July in the Dáil, there was uproar about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, and I think that was a reflection of the frenetic pace of activity in July within the Dáil itself and the Oireachtas more generally. But I think that I was happy with that in one sense, in that we just went for it. But I think it's settling down more now. And I think the plan is there for 6 to 9 months. NPHET will keep coming with advices, of that I've no doubt. And
you will balance off other considerations against the health advice?
Yes, in time if necessary.
Is Fianna Fáil facing an existential crisis?
No, I've asked that question.
10% in the business. I know polls are polls. You won't run a government.
I've been bedeviled with polls since I've been bedeviled with polls since I became leader.
Never been at 10%.
I've kind of been thereabouts.
4% in Dublin.
But we don't. I don't. That is not a true reflection of where we are. I mean, look, we've the largest number of councillors in the country. You take people like Pascal Fitzmaurice in Castlereagh, Trevor Gilligan in Clondalk, and Imelda Goldsborough in Tipperary. I mention them. They're not TDs or anything, but they're champions of their community. And we have a great community base as a party through our councillors, the length and breadth of the country. So
that Fianna Fáil machine is still out there in the heartlands.
If you take the vote for government, it was the largest exercise in grassroots democracy of any political party, I'd say, in the history of the state. I mean, 11,500 people voted. 74% said go into government, 15,000 had registered. Our challenge is to energise that base. We do need, we have a good young generation of TDs coming in. The Cormac Devlins, the Christopher O'Sullivan, Padraig O'Sullivan, Aaron McGrean and Louth, who's a senator. There's great potential there. Yeah, so I'm not fazed by this poll. I take a longer term view.
People would say on that that. Optically, and again, maybe you're more about the substance, but optically, people look at Fine Gael and see young talent coming through and everything. They tend to look at Fianna Fáil and go, they don't see the young people coming through. They don't see the talented team there.
Actually, there's a more talented young generation of Fianna Fáil now than most, if you look at it. And I've referenced quite a number of them there for you. You've Cathal Crone in Clare as well, and Paul McAuliffe in Dublin Northwest. People like James Lawless, very strong people who are not in government, and Jackie Call, who knows everything about agriculture that there is to know, chairman of the Agricultural Committee. There's a strong parliamentary party there, but it is within our capacity, and I think there has to be greater coherence, unity of purpose, because what I said to you earlier about people not really wanting self-indulgence in politics or in political parties, I mean that. People are not now overly exercised about where Fianna Fáil goes, where Fine Gael goes. Where people are exercised now is they want decisions made in their best interest to keep their children at school, to keep themselves safe, to keep their elderly protected, to keep, to do better on special needs.
But you need to keep your party together as well, don't you?
That will happen.
And you have people like Eamon O'Keefe coming out. The day of your big set piece, that was Tuesday was viewed as a make or break day for you and for the government in terms of settling things and pointing a way forward. Eamon O'Keefe comes out that morning on Clare Byrne looking for a change of leadership. Are you going to deal with that?
Well, I think what happened that evening at the following evening, at the Parliamentary Party was a very interesting response to that, where those younger people I mentioned just came up and said, "Listen, we've had enough of this."
Even Jim O'Callaghan has come around now too. He wants you to succeed. Have you spoken to him, or has there been some kind of...
I meet Jim. Jim is a constructive politician. I think he's a very engaged politician, very able politician. I listened to his interview last week. I thought it was very good. I thought it was a very significant contribution in itself. And he said to me at the very beginning, he wants the government to succeed. And he wants, obviously, the milestones that we have to reach are reached and achieved.
Okay. The just incident yesterday with the Taoiseach where a young person came up and threw a smoothie at him. Is there what did you think of that? Is there a fractiousness creeping in?
Well, first of all, to be fair to Leo, I think he took it very well, and I spoke to him afterwards. I rang him actually and said, "What was that about?" And he said, "Look, you saw his comments yesterday. He was quite witty and humorous about it yesterday." But I think it is a worry. The great thing about Irish politics is our accessibility. Irish politicians can walk the streets, can go into parks. I would hate to think that an event like that could inhibit that or restrict that, because the security people are going to get a bit worried, and that's one of the changes I found being a Taoiseach. Just people kind of walking with you or behind you, or worried. And I was able to walk through the streets the other day, down to Toons Bridge to get me salads, a bit of Cork in Dublin, and a guy stops me with a Liverpool mask on his desk, on his mouth. He just says to me, you better lock her down. I mean, he was giving me advice as only a Dubliner can, with the certainty and the wit that a Dubliner can. But that's a lovely interaction in Irish politics that other political systems do not have. I was able to walk across the taxi rank and people spoke to me. Leo was in the park, getting a video done. I'd hate if the danger of those kind of things, apart from it could have been something worse given the access, but the danger is that it would undermine that accessibility that I think is a strength of Irish politics. And whether you agree or disagree with politicians, or you might dislike politicians, the one thing we have is that sort of connection with people, walking the streets, engaging, having a chat, no matter who you are or what position you hold. That's a very great strength, and I'd hate to see that undermined by the kind of thing that happened yesterday.
Okay.
And I think Leo's taken it very well, and he's more reflective and philosophical about it than angry about it.
Okay. Taoiseach Micheál Martin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Brendan.
Brendan O'Connor on RTE Radio 1.